The stars outside the small window looked cold and distant, pressed her forehead against the thick glass and watched them pass by, one after another, like tiny lights floating in an endless ocean of darkness. She had never felt so far from home. 3 days ago, she was kneeling in the red soil of Colony K7, collecting samples for her research. The colony was small and quiet, just a few hundred people living in metal buildings surrounded by experimental farms. Was 26 years old and worked as an agricultural researcher. Her job was simple: find ways to grow food in alien soil. She loved her work. She loved the silence of the fields and the smell of wet earth after the artificial rain. Then the ships came. They appeared without warning, blocking out the sun like giant metal birds. The colonists had no weapons, no defenses. They were farmers and scientists, not soldiers. The skinned creatures that poured out of the ships moved fast and spoke in harsh, clicking sounds. They grabbed everyone they could find and dragged them into the cargo holds. Remembered running. She remembered the burning smell of plasma fire and the screams of her colleagues. She remembered a cold hand grabbing her arm and throwing her to the ground. After that, everything became a blur of darkness and fear. Now she was here, in a cell on a ship called the Quiet Harvest. The name was almost funny in a horrible way. They were the harvest. They were being collected like vegetables from a field. The cell was small and with metal walls and a floor that vibrated with the hum of the ship's engines. Shared it with 2 other Koreans from the colony. Was an engineer, a tall man in his 30s with tired eyes and rough hands. Was a medic, younger than, with short hair and a face that hadn't stopped showing fear since they were taken. "How long do you think we've been traveling?" asked in Korean. Her voice was barely a whisper. 3 days, answered. He was sitting against the wall with his knees pulled up to his chest. Maybe 4. It's hard to tell without sunlight. Turned away from the window and looked at her cellmates. They feed us twice a day, she said. I've counted 6 meals, so 3 days. Stared at her. You've been counting. I've been counting everything. Lifted his head. There was something like hope in his eyes, but also confusion. Why? What's the point? Sat down on the cold floor and spoke quietly. The guards change every 8 hours. There are 4 of them watching this section of the ship. They carry weapons on their right hip, some kind of energy pistol. The door to our cell opens with a panel on the outside, about shoulder height for them. The ship makes a different sound when it changes direction, a lower hum. We've changed direction twice since I woke up. His mouth fell open, leaned forward, suddenly very interested. You learned all that in 3 days? He asked. I had nothing else to do, said simply, and I don't plan to stay here forever. The creatures who captured them were called. Learned this by listening carefully whenever the guards spoke near the cells. Their language was difficult, full of clicks and deep sounds, but some words repeated often. Slave, market, price. They were tall, almost 2 meters, with skin that looked like stone and eyes that were completely black, like holes in their faces. They wore dark armor and moved with the confidence of creatures who had never been challenged. To them, the prisoners were not people. They were products, cargo, things to be sold. Commander Toro visited the cells once. He was larger than the other, with golden marks on his armor that showed his rank. He walked slowly between the cells, looking at the prisoners the way a farmer might look at animals before a sale. When he reached cell, he stopped and studied her through the bars. Human, he said in broken common, the trade language of the galaxy. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. Small species, weak, but good workers, I hear. You will fetch a fair price. Looked up at him but said nothing. She kept her face empty, her body still. She had learned already that showing emotion was dangerous. The guards laughed at those who cried and hurt those who showed anger. Being invisible was safer. Toro seemed pleased by her silence. He made a note on a small device and moved on. After he left, started crying softly. What's going to happen to us? Are we going to be slaves forever? put a hand on her shoulder but couldn't find words to comfort her. They all knew the truth. The galaxy was vast and cruel, and humanity was new to it. Earth had only made contact with other species 50 years ago. Humans had no powerful allies, no great fleets, no reputation. To the older species, they were children, weak, primitive, and easy to take. But didn't cry. She sat in the corner of the cell and watched the guards through the bars. She counted their steps. She timed their pauses. She memorized the rhythm of their patrol. "We wait," she said finally, her voice calm and steady. "We watch, we learn, and when the time comes, we act." Frowned, "Act how? There are hundreds of them and only 3 of us. We don't have weapons. We don't even know where we are." Turned to look at him. Her brown eyes were quiet but certain. "Every prison has a weakness. Every ship has a flaw. Every guard makes mistakes. We just need to find them." Wiped her tears and looked at with something like wonder. "How can you be so calm? Aren't you afraid?" Was silent for a moment. Of course she was afraid. She was terrified. Every night she closed her eyes and saw the burning colony, heard the screams, felt the cold hands grabbing her. But fear was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. Fear made you weak. Fear made you give up. "I'm afraid," she admitted quietly. "But I'm also angry, and right now anger is more useful." The ship hummed around them, carrying them deeper into unknown space. Somewhere ahead was a slave market where they would be sold like objects. Somewhere behind them was Earth, a blue dot lost among a billion stars. But wasn't thinking about Earth or the market. She was thinking about the guard who always paused at the 3rd cell before turning around. She was thinking about the slight delay in the door mechanism when it opened. She was thinking about the small gap in the patrol pattern every 4 hours. She was thinking about survival. And deep inside her, in a place she didn't know existed, something ancient was beginning to wake up. On the 5th day, they came for the testing. Heard them before she saw them. Heavy footsteps echoing through the metal corridors, getting closer. The other prisoners in nearby cells began to stir, some crying, others pressing themselves against the back walls as if they could disappear into the metal. The door to cell opened with a hiss. 2 guards stepped inside, their black eyes scanning the 3 humans. One of them pointed at. "You come." His face went pale, but he stood up slowly. He looked back at and trying to appear brave, but his hands were shaking. The guards grabbed his arms and pulled him out. The door closed behind them and he was gone. Grabbed sleeve. "What are they going to do to him?" "I don't know," admitted, "but we'll find out soon." 3 hours later was thrown back into the cell. His face was bruised, his lip was bleeding, and he could barely stand. Rushed to him immediately, using her medical training to check his injuries. Helped lower him to the floor. "What happened?" she asked quietly. Coughed and winced in pain. "Testing," he managed to say. "They test everyone: strength, speed, pain tolerance. They want to know how much we're worth." He told them everything. They had a special room for testing their cargo. They made prisoners run on machines until they collapsed. They hit them to see how much damage they could take. They asked questions and punished wrong answers with electric shocks. It was all about measuring value. How hard could this slave work? How long could they last? How obedient were they? The overseer said, his voice bitter. "His name is, he enjoys it. The testing, the pain, he smiles when he hurts people." Filed the name away in her memory. She would remember that name. The next day they came for her. She was gone for 4 hours. When she returned, she was shaking so badly that she couldn't speak. Her arms were covered in small cuts, and there were burn marks on her wrists from the electric shocks. Held her while she cried, saying nothing because there was nothing to say. On the 7th day, they came for her. The guards led her through narrow corridors, past dozens of cells filled with creatures from species she had never seen. Some looked almost human. Others were completely alien, scaled, furred, tentacled. All of them wore the same expression of hopeless despair. The testing room was large and cold, with bright lights that hurt her eyes. In the center stood Overseer. He was different from the others, shorter, older, with deep scars across his face. He wore no armor, just simple black clothes that showed off the muscles beneath. In his hand was a thin metal rod that crackled with electricity. "Ah," said as was brought before him. "The quiet one, I've heard about you. The guards say you never cry, never beg. Let's see how long that lasts." The testing began. First came the physical tests. They made her run on a machine until her legs burned and her lungs screamed for air. They made her lift heavy objects until her arms trembled. They recorded everything on their devices, measuring, calculating, assigning numbers to her suffering. Did everything they asked. She didn't complain, she didn't resist, she just watched and counted. She counted the guards in the room 3. She counted the exits too. She counted the steps between her and the door 17. Seemed almost disappointed by her compliance. He walked around her slowly, the electric rod tapping against his leg. "You're strong for a human," he admitted, "but strength means nothing without spirit. Let's test that too." He brought the rod down on her shoulder. Pain exploded through her body, white-hot and blinding. Gasped but didn't scream. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood, but she kept her voice locked inside. Hit her again and again. Each strike sent fire through her nerves, but still she didn't scream. She looked straight ahead at the wall behind him and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. After the 10th strike, stopped. He was breathing hard, not from effort but from frustration. He had expected her to break by now. Most prisoners did. "Interesting," he said slowly. "Very interesting. Most humans are weak. They cry after the first hit, but you're different." Said nothing. Her body was shaking with pain, but her face remained empty. Leaned close, his black eyes studying her. "What are you hiding, little human? What's behind those quiet eyes?" Still said nothing, but inside her mind, she was memorizing his face, his voice, the way he moved. She was learning his patterns just like she learned the guards' patrol routes. Every piece of information was a weapon waiting to be used. The testing continued for 3 more hours. They cut her arms to see how fast she healed. They starved her for a day to test her endurance. They put her in a dark room alone to see if isolation would break her mind. Through it all, remained silent. When they finally returned her to the cell and rushed to help her, she collapsed against the wall, exhausted and hurting but still alert, still watching. "How did you survive that?" asked as she cleaned wounds. "How did you stay so calm?" Closed her eyes. "I wasn't calm, I was counting." "Counting what?" "Everything. Guards, exits, weapons, weaknesses." She opened her eyes and looked at her cellmates. "Is left-handed. He favors his right leg, old injury probably. The testing room has a ventilation shaft in the ceiling that's big enough for a person to crawl through. The guards there carry keys on chains around their necks, not on their belts like the others." Stared at her in amazement. "You noticed all that while they were torturing you?" "Pain is temporary," said quietly. "Information is permanent. They think they're breaking us with these tests, but every test teaches us something about them. Every day on this ship is a day we learn more about our enemy." Sat back and looked at with new eyes. She had known on the colony, a quiet woman who liked gardening and reading old books. She never would have guessed that this same woman could endure torture while memorizing escape routes. "What are you?" whispered. "Really, what are you?" Looked at her hands. They were trembling slightly and her arms were covered in cuts and burns. She should be crying. She should be broken. But instead she felt something else, something deep and old rising inside her, like fire slowly building beneath her skin. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'm starting to find out." That night, as the ship hummed through the darkness of space, dreamed of golden light. She dreamed of eyes that weren't her own, looking out from her face. She dreamed of a voice whispering ancient words she couldn't understand. When she woke up, her hands had stopped trembling. And deep in her chest, something was ready to wake up. The quiet harvest was preparing to dock at the slave market. Could feel it in the way the ship moved, slower, more careful, with more turns than usual. Through the small window of her cell, she could see distant lights that weren't stars. They were the lights of a space station, growing larger with each passing hour. On this day, Overseer decided to give the prisoners one final lesson. The guards opened all the cells in their section and forced the prisoners into the corridor. There were about 50 of them, humans and other species didn't recognize. They stood in a line, weak and tired, their eyes on the floor. Walked among them like a king inspecting his property. He was wearing his ceremonial blade today, a curved sword that hung from his belt. Had seen it before but never up close. The blade was old, covered in strange markings, and it gleamed under the ship's lights. "Tomorrow," announced in common, "you will be sold. Some of you will go to mines, some to factories, some to places worse than you can imagine. But before you leave my ship, I want you to understand something very important." He stopped walking and turned to face the prisoners. His black eyes swept over them like darkness. "You are nothing," he said. "Your lives mean nothing, your hopes mean nothing. The moment you were captured, you stopped being people. You became products, goods, things. And things do not fight back, things do not hope, things simply obey." One of the prisoners, a young man from a species didn't know, made a small sound of protest. It wasn't even a word, just a noise of despair. Moved faster than seemed possible. His blade flashed and the young man fell. He didn't get up. Let out a small cry, grabbed her arm to keep her quiet. The other prisoners trembled and looked away. None of them dared to speak. Cleaned his blade slowly, enjoying the fear he had created. Then his eyes found. She was standing straight, looking directly at him. Not with challenge or anger, just looking, observing. The same way she had looked during every test, every beating, every moment of torture. "You," said, walking toward her. "The quiet human, you still haven't learned to look away, have you?" Didn't answer, she didn't move. Stopped in front of her. He was so close that she could smell him, a strange, bitter smell like metal and something rotten. His face twisted into something that might have been a smile. "You think you're special," he said quietly so only she could hear. "You think your silence makes you strong, but let me tell you something, little human. Silence doesn't protect you. Nothing protects you. I could kill you right now and no one would care. No one would remember." He raised his blade, turning it so the light caught the edge. "Humans die so easily," he announced loudly, returning to his performance for the crowd. "Their bodies are soft, their lives are short, they're barely worth selling, really, but sometimes they need a reminder of their place." The blade came down towards neck. What happened next would become legend. His hand moved, not with the clumsy speed of a frightened human, but with something else, something ancient, something that had been sleeping inside humanity since before they learned to make fire. She caught the blade. The edge cut into her palm and blood ran between her fingers, but the blade stopped. It stopped completely, as if it had struck a wall of stone. Stared at his weapon, then at the small human woman holding it. His black eyes went wide. Looked up at him. Her eyes had changed. The soft brown was gone, replaced by a burning golden color that seemed to glow from within. It was like looking at stars, at fire, at something that was not entirely human anymore. "You shouldn't have done that," said. Her voice was different too, deeper, more certain, as if someone else was speaking through her. For one heartbeat, everything was frozen. The prisoners, the guards, even himself caught in the grip of sudden, primal fear. Then moved. She twisted the blade from his hand so fast that his wrist broke with a sharp crack. Before he could scream, she spun and drove the handle of the sword into his stomach. He folded over, gasping. The guards reacted, reaching for their weapons. They were too slow. Was among them like wind through leaves. Her body moved in ways that shouldn't have been possible, too fast, too precise, too deadly. One guard fell, then another. She didn't even use the blade at first, just her hands, finding weak points in anatomy that she had learned during weeks of careful observation. Third guard, fourth guard. Their weapons fired but wasn't where the shots landed. She was already moving, already striking, already winning. In less than a minute, all 4 guards were on the floor. Stood in the center of the corridor, breathing hard. The golden light in her eyes was fading slightly, but it was still there, still burning. Her hand was covered in blood, both her own and others. The ceremonial blade hung loose at her side. The prisoners stared at her in absolute silence. Was the first to speak. He whispered, What are you?" Looked at her blood-covered hands. She was asking herself the same question. What had just happened? Where had that speed come from? That strength? That knowledge of exactly where to strike? She had felt something wake up inside her when the blade came down. Something old. Something powerful. It was like a door had opened in her mind, and through it came abilities that humans weren't supposed to have. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "But right now it doesn't matter. Right now we need to move." She looked at the prisoners, 50 frightened faces looking back at her, waiting for instructions. "The guards have keys around their necks," she said clearly. "Take them. Free the other cells. The ship has 8 sections. We need to free them all before the alarm spreads." No one moved. "Now," commanded, and her voice carried authority that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her. The prisoners moved, and 3 others grabbed keys from the fallen guards, ran to the first cell and started unlocking it. Turned toward the corridor that led deeper into the ship. She could hear running footsteps in the distance, more guards coming. The alarm would sound any moment. They had very little time. But for the first time since she was captured, felt something that wasn't fear or anger. She felt hope. And as she walked toward the sound of the coming enemies, her golden eyes began to glow brighter, and the ancient thing inside her settled into her bones like it had always belonged there. They had made a terrible mistake when they captured this human. They were about to learn exactly how terrible. The alarm filled the ship with its screaming sound. Red lights flashed in every corridor. The quiet harvest had finally realized that something was very wrong. Moved through the ship like a shadow with golden eyes. Behind her, freed prisoners followed in growing numbers, had taken charge of organizing them, sending groups to secure different sections while he stayed close to. Worked among the wounded, using her medical skills to help those who could still fight. "How many guards on the ship?" asked as they ran through a narrow corridor. "About 200, answered. "Maybe more, but they're spread across 8 sections. If we move fast enough, we can isolate them before they organize." 200 against us. We don't have weapons, we barely have. "We have surprise," cut him off. "We have numbers and we have me." She didn't say it with pride. It was just a fact. Since the awakening, as she had started calling it in her mind, had become something different. She could see movements before they happened. She could feel enemies around corners. Her body moved with a speed and strength that didn't belong to any normal human. She didn't understand it. She didn't have time to understand it. All she knew was that something ancient had woken up inside her, and right now, it was the only thing keeping them alive. They reached Section 4, where the ship's engineering bay was located. This was important. Whoever controlled engineering controlled the ship. 2 guards stood at the entrance. They raised their weapons when they saw the approaching group. Didn't slow down. She was among them before they could fire, moving like water through stones. 2 strikes, 2 bodies falling. She took their weapons and tossed one too. "Do you know how to use this?" Caught it awkwardly. "I'm an engineer, not a soldier." "Then stay behind me and learn." Inside the engineering bay, they found something unexpected. The room was huge, filled with humming machines and glowing displays. and in the corner, trying to hide behind a massive generator, was a teenager. He was human, Korean like them. His face was thin and pale, and his clothes were the same prisoner uniform they all wore. But his eyes were different, sharp, intelligent, moving constantly across the room as if calculating something. "Don't hurt me," he said quickly when approached. "I'm not one of them, I'm a prisoner, they made me work here." His golden eyes studied him. "What's your name?" "Park, they took me from Colony K7, same as you probably. I was on a school trip when the ships came." Moved closer. "A school trip, how old are you?" 16. Felt something twist in her chest. 16 years old, taken from his home, forced to work in an alien engine room. The truly had no limits to their cruelty. "Why did they put you here?" she asked. His expression changed slightly, a flash of pride beneath the fear. "Because I'm good with machines. I learned their systems in 2 days. I know this ship better than most of the crew." And exchanged a look. "Can you control the ship from here?" asked. Thought for a moment. "Not completely. The bridge controls navigation and weapons, but from here I can control life support, power distribution, internal doors, artificial gravity." He paused. "I can make their lives very difficult." For the first time since the uprising began, smiled. The next hour was chaos for the doors that should have opened stayed shut. Doors that should have been locked opened at the worst times. The lights in some sections went out completely. In others, the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, making it impossible to walk straight. Worked at the engineering console with focused determination, his young face lit by the glow of alien displays. He had memorized the ship systems during his time as a prisoner, not because he had to, but because his mind couldn't stop learning. Now that knowledge was becoming a weapon. "Commander Toril has sealed himself on the bridge," reported. "He sent a distress signal. If there are any ships nearby, they'll come to help." "How long do we have?" asked. "Maybe 2 hours, maybe less." "Then we need to take the bridge in 2 hours." Shook his head. "The bridge is designed like a fortress. One entrance, heavy doors, and Toril has at least 20 guards with him. We can't just walk in." "We don't need to walk in," said. Her golden eyes were glowing brighter now, and her voice carried that strange double quality as if something else was speaking with her. "We need them to come out." She turned to, "Can you cut off air to the bridge?" His fingers flew across the console. "Yes, the life support systems are routed through here, but they'll have emergency reserves, maybe 30 minutes of oxygen." "That's enough, cut it off." Hesitated. Are we trying to kill them?" Looked at the young engineer. Despite everything she had become, despite the ancient fire burning inside her, she was still human. She could still feel mercy. She could still make choices. "No," she said. "We're trying to make them surrender, cut the air slowly. Give them time to realize what's happening. When they open the doors to breathe, we'll be waiting." The next 30 minutes were the longest of his life. She positioned freed prisoners at every approach to the bridge. Most of them had never held weapons before, farmers, scientists, teachers. But they were angry and they were scared, and they had nowhere else to go except forward. Stood directly in front of the main bridge entrance. Beside her, held his captured weapon with steady hands. Behind her, 200 former slaves waited in silence. Inside the bridge, the air was running out. The first sign was the flickering of the status lights above the door. His voice came through a speaker he had managed to connect. "They're panicking in there. CO2 levels are rising. Toril is shouting at his engineers." "Hold steady," he said. "Wait for the doors." The seconds stretched into minutes. Could hear muffled sounds from inside, voices, movement, arguments. There were proud creatures. Surrendering went against everything they believed, but even pride couldn't survive without oxygen. Finally, with a heavy grinding sound, the bridge doors began to open. Commander Toril stood at the entrance, gasping for air. His golden rank markings looked dull under the emergency lights. Behind him, his guards had their weapons raised, but their hands were shaking from oxygen deprivation. Toral's black eyes found her golden eyes, and for the first time real fear crossed his face. "What are you?" he choked out. "What species are you really?" Walked toward him slowly. The prisoners behind her raised their weapons. There would be no fighting, everyone could see that. They were beaten. "We're human," answered, "and we're the last species you should have ever tried to enslave." Toral fell to his knees, not in surrender but because his legs couldn't support him anymore. Around him, his guards dropped their weapons one by one. The bridge of the quiet harvest belonged to the prisoners now. Looked around at the captured command center, at the screens showing the stars outside, at the course laid in for the slave market they would never reach. She said into the speaker, "Change our course, get us away from space." The ship began to turn toward freedom. Its eyes, still burning gold, looked out at the infinite darkness and wondered what else was waiting to wake up inside her. The quiet harvest drifted through neutral space, far from territory, far from any flags or borders. The stars outside were unknown, but for the first time in weeks, they felt welcoming instead of threatening. Stood on the bridge, looking out at the endless darkness. Her eyes had returned to their normal brown color, but she could still feel the golden fire sleeping inside her, ready to wake again if needed. She didn't know what it was or where it came from. All she knew was that it had saved them. It had saved everyone on this ship. Behind her, the bridge was alive with activity. Former prisoners had taken over every station, learning the systems with surprising speed. Had become the unofficial second in command, organizing work shifts and managing supplies. Had set up a medical bay in one of the cargo holds, treating the many wounded among them. And the teenage genius who had learned alien technology in days was now the ship's chief engineer, a role he wore with quiet pride despite his young age. "We have a problem," said, approaching. "The prisoners, what do we do with them?" It was a difficult question. There were nearly 150 still alive on the ship, including Commander Toral and Overseer. They were locked in the same cells that had once held the slaves, guarded by those who had suffered under them. Some of the freed prisoners wanted revenge. Had heard them talking in the corridors, dark plans, angry words. After everything they had done, could anyone blame them? "We keep them locked up," said after a long moment. "We feed them, we don't hurt them." Frowned after everything they did, the beatings, the killings, murdered a prisoner right in front of us. "I know," turned to face him, and even without the golden glow, her eyes carried a weight that made him step back. "But if we torture them, if we kill them for revenge, what does that make us? We'd be no different from them." "We would be different," argued. "We'd be punishing evil, not innocent people." "That's what they think too." His voice was soft but firm. "They don't see us as people. They see us as animals, as things. That's how they justify what they do. If we start seeing them as monsters instead of people, we start down the same path." Was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded slowly. "You're right. I don't like it, but you're right. Being better than your enemy is never easy," said. "But it's the only way to truly win." Later that day, visited the cells where the crew was held. Commander Toral was sitting against the wall, his golden marks dirty and his proud posture broken. When he saw, his black eyes filled with something between fear and hatred. "Have you come to gloat?" he asked. "No," crouched down to his level, looking at him through the bars. "I came to tell you that you won't be harmed. When we reach safe territory, you'll be released." Toral stared at her. "Why? We would have sold you. We would have worked you to death in mines or factories. We showed you no mercy." "That's exactly why," said. "Because I want you to remember this. I want you to tell everyone what happened here. Tell them that humans captured your ship. Tell them that humans had every reason to kill you but chose not to. Tell them that mercy is not weakness." She stood up and looked down at the fallen commander. Your species has been taking slaves for centuries. You've never met anyone who could stop you. That changes now. Tell your people the humans are awake, and we don't forgive, but we can show mercy. Remember which one is more frightening. She walked away, leaving Toril in stunned silence. The next morning called everyone to the bridge. He had been working through the night on something important, a message. I've figured out how to access the ship's long-range communications, he explained, his young face bright with excitement. We can broadcast on all frequencies. Anyone in this sector will hear us. What kind of message? Asked. Looked at, that's up to her. Thought for a long moment. This was more than just a rescue ship now. This was a statement. This was the beginning of something new. Record this, she said finally. She stepped up to the communication station. The red light blinked on, indicating that her words would travel across the stars. This ship belonged to the slave syndicate, began, her voice clear and strong. Its name was Quiet Harvest, and it was filled with prisoners taken from their homes, their families, their lives. That ship is gone. Today, this vessel belongs to the free. She paused, gathering her thoughts. To those who trade in lives, to the slavers, the raiders, the monsters who profit from suffering, we are coming. We know what you do in the darkness between stars. We know the routes you travel, the markets you use, the lies you tell. We were your victims. Now we are your hunters. Her voice grew harder. To those still in chains, in slave ships, in mining colonies, in places where hope seems impossible, hold on. Help is coming. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. Every day more of us wake up. Every day we grow stronger. We will find you. We will free you. She looked at all the others gathered on the bridge. Former slaves, former victims, now something new. This is the beginning, she said, not the end. My name is I am human, and this is our promise. No one takes us without a fight. No one breaks us without paying the price. We are awake now, and we will never sleep again. She nodded too, who ended the transmission. Silence filled the bridge. Then slowly, someone started to clap. Others joined. Soon the entire room was filled with applause and cheers, the sound of people who had been given something they thought was lost forever. Hope, as the celebration continued, approached quietly. That thing that happened to you, the golden eyes, the speed, the strength, do you think it could happen to other humans? Looked at her hands, normal hands, human hands, but somewhere inside them was something ancient and powerful waiting. I don't know, she admitted, but I think it's not just me. I think it's something that's been sleeping in all of us, something our species forgot about long ago. What triggers it? Remembered the moment the blade came down toward her neck, the certainty of death, the absolute refusal to accept it. Desperation, she said, or maybe determination, the moment when you have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. She looked out at the stars, countless points of light in the infinite darkness. There are millions of humans out there in the galaxy now, colonists, travelers, prisoners. How many of them are facing that same moment right now? How many of them are about to wake up? Smiled slightly. They really made a mistake when they started taking humans. They didn't just make a mistake, said, and for just a moment her brown eyes flickered with the faintest hint of gold. They lit a spark, and that spark is going to become a fire that burns across every slave market, every prison ship, every dark corner of this galaxy. The ship continued its journey through the stars. Somewhere behind them the message was spreading. Somewhere ahead, freedom was waiting. And all across the galaxy, in the hearts of humans who didn't know their own strength, something ancient was beginning to stir. The awakening had begun. This was only the first chapter.